My name is Brad Bernthal. I'm the director of the Entrepreneurship Initiative here at Silicon Flatirons. Just in terms of who is in the room, how many people from campus tonight? That's pretty cool. Off campus. You guys are cool too. I don't want to be exclusionary on that. And people who are first time to an Unplugged session? Pretty good size. So this is somewhat the actor's studio for entrepreneurs. We've been doing this now for 7 or 8 years. It's co-sponsored by Atlas, and Jill is the associate director over at Atlas in Silicon Flatirons, and this tends to be a lot of fun. In terms of some traditions that we have, we'll start with a moment for people to announce upcoming events. Ashley, if you don't mind standing up.
Institute, so there's some really amazing mentors, and it's open to students, community members to sign up, and that's on all the websites.
How do people follow up?
Go to either the government Twitter or follow up with me afterwards. I think we should do it.
Stay there. Sue?
How many 1Ls are here? Okay, how many MBA students? Keep your hands up, 1L. Yeah, okay, all of the 1Ls and MBA students in this room are specifically personally invited to sign up for Philosophy of Entrepreneurship, otherwise known as Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Public Policy. You're all eligible to do that, as well as engineering students. So one credit elected this spring being taught by myself and Ron Sandra, so please join us.
Others? Back. People who are looking to hire. Any employers in the room looking to reach an attractive demographic?
Right here, man.
Yes?
Well, yeah. Oh,
Go ahead.
Sure.
What sort of position are you advertising?
Oh, I mean, just come on down and apply for a job. We're always hiring.
We're going to have like 2 aisles full after this.
Absolutely.
Here at the law school, we're going to be hiring a new communications director. So if that's of interest, let me know and I'll get you some additional notes on that. A quick thank you in terms of our team. Cactus is over there. Anna Noscasi, the program director for Silicon Flatirons, is here in front. She probably will not acknowledge the thank you. And then we have several student volunteers, many of whom were out front. Please help me give a warm thank you to people who are making this happen. All right, what we're going to do here is, in a moment, Chester is going to come up and make the big introduction of Dave and set up the event. The way that the event will work is we'll do moderated Q&A until about 7:20 tonight. We know a lot of you have questions for Dave, so we'll leave plenty of time for audience Q&A, and then we'll wrap up at about 7:45, and then we have a reception next door. With that, the final tradition is take a moment, spot somebody that you did not know before coming into the room tonight, introduce yourself, and we'll get going in about 2 minutes.
It's like community church.
It is. This is an old church.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're ready to go. Shh. Enough. I think we're ready to go, everyone. Hi, I'm Chester Kurtz with Kurtz Fargo. We're an accounting firm located here in downtown Boulder and sponsor of Entrepreneurs Unplugged. When Matt Fargo, my business partner, and I started the firm, we spent a lot of time networking and continue to spend time networking. But some of the events that we always frequently attend are here at Silicon Flatirons. These programs, New Tech Meetup, Entrepreneurs Unplugged, and the Crash Course series are outstanding. And we want to thank you, Brad, and all your team here for all your hard work. Quickly introduce the moderators. Jill Dupre is Associate Director at Atlas, and Brad Bernthal is Associate Professor, Colorado Law School, and Director of Entrepreneurship Initiative at Silicon Flatirons. Our guest entrepreneur is Dave Query. Dave grew up in Boulder. He attended the Culinary Institute of America at Hyde Park, New York. After graduating, he hit the road and traveled throughout Europe, and then lived in cities and cooked in kitchens throughout the U.S. His travels took him to New Orleans, Chicago, San Francisco, New York, Miami, and northern Michigan before returning home to Boulder. He was the co-owner of original Lick Skillet Cafe in Gold Hill, and he started the Big Red F restaurant group in 1994. The company is presently a collection of 9 different restaurants and locations throughout the Front Range, including Zolo, Jack's, the West End, and the Post. Please help me welcome Dave Query.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start off
Okay.
and just help orient us. You grew up in Boulder. Talk about your first experience working in a restaurant and sort of when you first thought you might want to do this.
The first job I had was at Mustard's Last Stand, greatest hot dog in the world, still to this day. At about 14, I worked there, and school wasn't really my thing. Graduated barely from Fairview High School. So my folks were kind of trying to steer me in the right direction of what this was going to look like, as all my siblings had done much better than I had at Fairview. So I started cooking. I worked at Eldora. I worked at some other restaurants in town here, Goldini's and at the hotel and a couple different places, and then started thinking about what I was going to do, and my stepmom at the time said, you should think about culinary school. You seem to really like to cook. So I went and looked at the Antlers program, which is a hotel down in Colorado Springs, and I went to Bend, Oregon, and they had a place called the Town and Country that had a 3-year apprenticeship program, and then I went to the Culinary Institute in Hyde Park, and I was kind of done because that was a great program. And so I got in there and went through that program, and cooking ever since.
Was cooking part of the household growing up? Were there?
Yeah, Italian family, and my mom was a great cook. A lot of big dinners and a lot of family dinners. Yeah, we all had a job to do, so it was part of the deal.
Pitch in, and were you a tinker? Do you enjoy cooking back even as a kid?
Oh yeah, very much so.
What was your best dish growing up?
We made lasagna a lot, and I liked doing that. So we made. My mom made this dish called beer chicken. Now that you mention it, and there was always a little bit of beer left in the can, so when she'd go do something, I'd kind of taste the beer. So yeah.
When you were getting into it, you mentioned whether it's at Mustard's Last Stand or some of the other experiences when you were still around high school. Were there any mentors that you looked up to at that time, or people that have proven to have an effect on you over your time as a restaurateur?
Well, during that time, not so much. Later in my career and through the early years, most definitely. And mostly people who I didn't want to be like made the bigger impression on me than the ones that I did want to be like. So 2 in particular that I very much wanted to be like, and I've stayed in contact with them, both from Chicago. Tony Amato owns a restaurant in Saugatuck right now in Michigan, a bar called the Red Dock. Total character. He's out here every New Year's Eve. And another guy named Phil Marienthal, who also owned a restaurant in Chicago, and his brother, Jim, was the mayor of Gold Hill way back when, if anybody knows Jim. And so those 2 guys were younger, and a lot of culture in both of their establishments that I was working at in Chicago, and immediately just glommed onto that whole that mentality of employing people.
Maybe before we leave this, without citing the names of people who instructed you by being bad models, what was it in particular, like, I do not want to be like that?
Well, just how you'd see they talk to people and treat people and just their business practices and making bad mistakes in public and just never knowing when to shut up, you know. Never miss an opportunity to shut the F up is a good mantra that everybody should carry out through their lives of just learn when to be quiet. Yeah.
So in terms of setting up your restaurants, they have such an incredible reputation in town for really excellent detail orientation and having your kitchens run like clockwork. Where did you pick that up? Did you have it from the beginning? How did you develop it?
Well, I was in the kitchen a lot in the beginning. So when we first had the Lick Skillet, and then I went and had a job at Cliff Young's in Denver, which was a much more refined and fine dining restaurant, and a lot of volume, and then did Q's in the Hotel Boulder and scaled it back a little bit. And then once we started Zolo, which was really the start of Big Red F, just had a lot of young, interested chefs in the kitchen. So there's several ways which kitchens run, professional kitchens, but the ones where people are in it for their livelihood and they're doing it as a career and a passion, usually things are much more organized and you don't like the chaotic Chinese fire drill and the frenetic pace. And so if you want to stay in it for a long time, you have to learn early on how to organize yourself and not have those chaotic moments, because it takes it out of you. It's already crazy enough. You don't need to be running around like crazy. So they just sort of fell in line.
And so how do you choose which chefs you work with? Is that part of the...
They've all, I think to this point, maybe a couple of them now, because there are so many other good restaurants in town, it's sometimes easier to go and find somebody who's already has that skill set. But early on, everybody came from within. So you're working with them and you know what they're all about, just like in any business where you're watching people do their thing and then you give them a chance.
So can you wind us back to Lick Skillet was the Gold Hill restaurant. That's the first one that you opened.
Right.
Are you the chef at this point?
I was the chef.
So you're the chef and the owner. What year did you open Lick Skillet?
That was 1980, end of 88.
88. Why Gold Hill?
I went to work there, and my business partner at the time, who was the chef, Eric Burson, Jim Conlon owned the building. Jim has since passed away. Eric's passed away. Jim owned the building. Jim wanted out, and Eric was like, I don't know what to do. I'm going to go to Mexico. And I was like, this is probably going to take like $10,000. Like, you ask your dad for $5,000, and I'll ask my grandfather for $5,000, and I bet we could figure this out. And that's exactly what we did for $10,000. And so then he went to the front of the house, and I was in the back as the chef.
10,000 bought you the place?
Bought the business.
Okay.
And a lot of chaos. It was crazy. Half an hour up a dirt road, and as soon as the snow starts to even remotely fly, you're done up in the mountains if you're trying to operate a business. And we had to truck all of our water up because there was no water, so everything was in a cistern. And it was a lot of fun. Cash only business, so at the end of every weekend it'd be like, one for you, one for me, one for you. Cash only is still the greatest way to go with whatever you can do, if you can do that. But it was a real learning situation.
What did you guys get right? What were the mistakes early?
Well, there was no expectation, so you went up there and you're driving a half an hour up a dirt road, and you didn't expect to see a good wine list. You didn't expect to have a server who had some skills. You didn't expect to read a menu that was locally sourced. And Chet Anderson, who's a farmer in town who started the Boulder Farmers Market, we lived out at the reservoir at the time, so we would drive by the farm and pick everything up and then drive up the hill and cook. And so we just, everything was super local and really a small, very easy to execute menu for us, but just totally unexpected experience from a customer standpoint.
What would we have been able to get at the Lick Skillet?
Great rack of lamb, good elk, a lot of wild game. And this was 88, so all the vintages of the wines were 84, 85, 86. Great vintages of California wines. And so it was really delicious.
Did it financially work?
No. No.
Just
Cash only, it was great in theory, but it didn't really work, yeah.
Did you pay back the $5K?
Paid back $5K, yeah, absolutely. So that worked.
Was it that the season was too short, margins didn't work? What did you
Did
take
it
away
for
on the
2
finance
years, and the end result was, like, unfortunately, cash only. My wife and I at the time walked in, and our beloved business partner was ramming cash down his pocket. So I was like, this isn't going to work. So we stopped. It was either him or us was going to leave, and so he bought us out.
front? Is this a metaphor, or was he literally
Oh, he
stepping-
was literally shoving cash into his pockets. Yeah, yeah, he was that guy.
So that's not an altogether uncommon story, right? In restaurants that someone's stealing.
Stealing? Sure. I mean, I think that's a percentage of our business. If we could somehow get into every person's house who's ever worked in one of the restaurants, my gosh, you know, if you're a 19-year-old college kid and you just moved here, you need plates and forks and silverware and toilet
liquor.
paper. And, well, liquor's harder to get at, you know, and cash is hard to get at. But I don't really look at that as gross theft. It's certainly theft, but we're happy to help. You know, we sometimes we put boxes out, you know, when we change china or glassware or silverware. We have a little place where people can get their stuff so they don't have to necessarily steal it. But it happens.
So you've gone through that.
Mm-hmm.
What made you think, I want to do it again?
In what way?
Like you've had this experience of having your business partner.
Oh,
stealing
that
from
way.
you.
Well, you know, it was sort of his thing, not ours. It's not who we are. And, you know, it's just one of those things that happen. Young enough and dumb enough just to be like, we'll write that off.
And what was the
But
next
from that
move?
part, I've never had another business partner. I have a lot of investors with whom I look at as business partners and talk about as business partners, but I've never had somebody in that same position that could do that again.
So we're now 1991,
That was 88 through 90.
okay? And you sell out to the person who was probably buying with your money in his pocket.
Right, exactly. I did mention that at the closing, actually. Yeah. Good one. Yeah.
And then you decide Zolo is going to be the next.
No, then Pat Miller, the Gabby Gourmet, the woman who's been on the radio forever, she recommended me to Cliff Young in Denver, and I took this job in this grand restaurant with a strolling violin and, you know, the Dorono Award and all these food and wine awards, and it was my biggest responsibility to date. And so I went and I was the chef of this restaurant. It was on 17th Avenue, where I think Hamburger Mary's is now. And it was, you know, Governor Romer in one corner and the coach of the Broncos and this person and Wellington Webb, and it was just a who's who of Denver, long before all the great restaurants that are now in Denver were in Denver. So this was one of the top places to go eat, and I was the chef there for 2 years.
I've heard you say that you like places where, quote, the back alley looks as good as the front door. Was that the case at the Lick Skillet? Was that something that you picked up at this next stop in Denver? Or where did you develop that mentality in terms of organization and having things run well?
I think it came when we got the West End, and we were very, everybody could see the back door. So then all of a sudden it became really important to us. Like, hey, we're all about the back door, you know? So it became something to think about when we were being looked at from all sides.
Well, wind us forward from that second experience into Big Red F and getting things off the ground.
So the second experience was Cliff Young's, and then I left there and I opened Q's in the Hotel Boulderado, and that was when it was upstairs, and did that for a year, almost 2 years, and then sold that to John Platt, who had it for 23 years. It just closed like 6 months ago, heartbreak. And John now owns Riff's, hardest working guy you'll ever meet in the restaurant business. And then at that point when I sold Q's, we moved to Traverse City, Michigan. My wife at the time and I, Boulder, that kid, I forget his name, he had just gotten curbed. He was gotten beat up on the hill, and we had 2 young boys, and it was like, it's time to go. Like, Boulder's changing, all the excuses in the world of what really needed to happen. But Michigan was going to solve these problems. So we loaded all the furniture, went to northern Michigan, bought a house, started remodeling, started looking around at what we were going to do, realized we made a terrible mistake, and then sold the house that we had bought 3 weeks earlier, and put all the furniture back in the truck and moved back here. 92 days total, made like $287 out of the whole thing clear. And it was like, all right, we're back. And so then opened Zolo.
What year?
March of '94.
And how did you finance Zolo?
Financed Zolo through some investors, and one of the things I think was our early success, my early success on doing that, was that I wasn't so concerned with 100% ownership. You know, I didn't need to have 100% of that business. I didn't think I could finance it with deals that weren't so great. So I've always said I would rather own, you know, 1/1000th of Microsoft than 100% of Dave's computer company. I didn't want to. I wanted to make it happen, and I figured out a way to talk to investors in that we raised $125,000, 5 units of 25, and we gave the investors 18% for their 25. So as soon as they got all their money back with interest, their 18 went to 9 for a total of 45, and our 10 went to 55. So we had ownership, but a lot of that can be solved in an operating agreement. So when you're writing that operating agreement and whatever you want to put in there is all what anybody will sign off on, you can solve a lot of those problems with control issues and who's going to make decisions. And so I had that sort of control, but I didn't need, in my mind, the percentage of ownership. Didn't matter.
How'd you choose the investors?
It was very lucky. I've got a great group that was 5 couples. One couple is no longer together, but they're both still partners. And I kind of interviewed them. So I had a total of 14 people, and they were kind of 20 years ago, some heavy hitters of Boulder money scene. And for instance, like Charlie and Jane Butcher, who are very good friends. And Charlie was an amazing guy, and he kind of dragged his feet a little bit, and the other 5 came in, and he came back and was like, okay, we're in. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's done. So a lot of people like that, John Sachs and some other folks that I had spoken to, who were all very generous with their time. But just kind of tried to figure out who I wanted to spend. I knew it was not going to be a flash in the pan. And we're all still friends. We all have parties, and I've traveled with a lot of those people, and we do a lot with the families together. And it's people that I wanted to grow older with. And there's nothing worse, especially in the restaurant business, to have a business partner who is that guy at the bar, who's, you know, talking about how he owns this place and making people feel uncomfortable. And it can go both ways. I mean, it can really go south if you have the wrong person in any business, but especially in the restaurant business.
So that's a super interesting structure. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about why you were willing to do that. And it sounds like it worked really well. But let's start with restaurant super high failure rate. Mm-hmm. We're about 1995 in Boulder at this point?
94.
94. It sounds like it wasn't a hard thing for you to get people interested. Was it that they'd been at other restaurants where you'd been the chef or running things, or what was the trust factor?
There was a little bit of that. Restaurants were sort of on the curve. There was no Food Channel yet. There was no, the celebrity chef thing was just sort of starting to take off, and people were interested in the restaurant business. And I think everybody, you know, I won't say everybody, but a lot of people want to be in the restaurant business. It's very intriguing, and it's very heady stuff. It wasn't a huge amount of money, $25,000, although it is a lot of money. It's still a lot of money. And I think the deal in that they were going to get their money back before I was very appealing to them. It wasn't something where, God, this is going to string along. And they got their money back, you know, within 2 years, and it wasn't going to take them a long time to realize that return.
So just to make sure everyone is keeping track of the math, you started with 10% ownership of a business that you're running, right? That was 90% that went to the financiers.
Correct.
In terms of control, was there ever any concern that they ultimately owned 90%? Did they have control rights that they could have thrown you out?
No, because the operating agreement was set up in such a way that it would have to be gross negligence on my part. And I felt pretty confident that I wasn't going to display gross negligence. And that worked out.
Whose idea was it for the legal structure? Did you have an attorney that suggested that, or did you come up with it?
I think ultimately it started off at 7% for a total of 14, and then it just kind of went up to 9.
A final question. So how many were here for Larry Gold's Unplugged session? Anybody? All right, so was Larry one of the investors originally? Larry told me a story. I don't know if this is true. I wanted to kick the tires on it, which is...
He lies a lot. Lie is not the right word. He tells a lot of stories. He's not a liar. Larry's not a liar. But he is a storyteller. So
as he tells the narrative, he had this 18% stake at the start, back in 1994. It goes really well, better than he ever expected. It drops down to a 9% stake. And at some point, he came back to you and said, Dave, you have paid this off way more than I ever expected. I don't expect to see any more money from you. And you said, no, that was the deal.
Well, it's kind of absurd that he and another partner, 2 of the 5, came and said that. You know, we had been drinking, so. But you know, it was very generous, and these 2 guys are very generous. And I don't think anybody ever expects to get their money back sometimes when you make a certain type of investment. And this was certainly one of those certain types of investment. Restaurant, highly risky. And so when they did get such a great return, and it was still going on, and that conversation was like 5 years ago, so it's 15 years in, and now there's, you know, 6 or 7 restaurants, and the return is really strong, and it's always been really good, that they felt like, you know, wow, this is way more than we ever thought. But the other side of that is that there's another 3 investors who would have never gone for that. So it was a deal's a deal. You know, you don't. I mean, I appreciated it, and those are serious friends that would say something like that. But I mean, you know, they could have lost all of that money, big time. So it's fine. We got a good deal.
You opened Zolo. Was it a success from the start?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there wasn't a lot going on in there. This is a time where we had low voltage lighting. And it was the design was kind of so fresh at the time that people would actually pull up in front and come in and touch, you know, look at the lights, because there was these 2 wires that were hanging down powering this light from copper wires, which was unheard of. Now you see that at the, you know, above the Slurpee machine at the 7-Eleven. But then it was like really cool, fresh design. The place felt good. It was fun. We were selling, you know, spicy food and good margaritas, and that's always a good combination. And so it kind of took off.
Who does the design of your restaurants?
In those days, it was Arc 11, E.J. Mead and his partners, Jim and Eric at the time. And then as it's evolved, I've kind of gotten more into the design of it with the post and the latest jacks, and we use Jim Bray as an architect, but just more for the architecture side, and because he likes things that are 90 degrees, and then we help make it look fun.
So you have the same team for really different restaurants with really different feels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But once you get into a space, we just opened this Jackson, Kansas City, concrete bunker. Just hard to imagine it being an auto mechanic's garage and really making it feel comfortable. And then the walls start to go in, and you start to get the feel, and you can kind of sense it. And we were sitting in there like a month in, and it's still just really rough. And I said to a couple of people on the team, like, you guys, in like 65 days, we're going to be standing right in this same exact spot, and it's going to feel like it's going to be done. Like, it's going to imagine this room when it was under construction and now how it feels. And sure enough, you know, that many days later, we were sitting there. It's really fun watching something. We did a time lapse when we did a remodel at Jackson, Denver, and it's fascinating to watch. You know, it's like that fox that's getting eaten by the maggots. It's the other way around. It's like the thing turns into something amazing. Just kidding on the fox.
So those 3 cities have really different feels: Boulder, Denver, Kansas City. Do the 3 Jacks have very different feels?
Yes. Not dramatically. You walk in, and our goal has always been that the oysters, you're coming for oysters most likely, and so most times you can touch the front door and touch the oysters at the same time. So that's still very forward to the experience. Island bar. But, you know, the space in Boulder is very long and narrow. The space in Denver is very long and narrow. But the one in Fort Collins has it's sideways. So here's the bar and here's the dining room. The one in Kansas City is the same style. Here's the bar area and here's the dining room. One in Kansas City feels awesome. Feels really good.
Whether it's with Jack's in a new city or going back to Zolo, in advising, especially people on the campus who are starting businesses, one of the strongest pieces of advice is get off the campus and go talk to potential customers and keep testing whether someone would pay for this product. Is it similar in the restaurant business, or is it different in terms of how did you know that Zolo would have a market niche here?
We tried to do things that weren't presently available. So there was a lot of Mexican, but there was no Southwestern. And so we did that. There was no Fish House. Still isn't, but that's going to change pretty quickly. And there was no Caribbean, so we did rumba. There was no diner, so we did the blue plate. We've kind of always done these things that weren't available because we could do Italian, but we'd be the 10th Italian. And so what's the fun in that, you know?
So it starts to click. In terms of team, were you hands-on day in, day out? Were there other core pieces of the team from the start that you brought on?
It's been nothing but the success of the team. Like, so I'm there at Zolo, and 6 months later, this little space on Pearl Street, West Pearl, comes available, which was the Small Wonder Cafe, and now that's Jack's. Opened 20 years ago today. And so 3 months after Zolo opens, I'm asking the investors for money again. And, I needed these great people, many of whom from that original team. Brent, who was a waiter at Zolo, is now the GM at Zolo 20 years later. And a lot of the original crew is still on board. So it has, there's nothing. I've been standing on the shoulders of everybody else, standing a little higher, but they've all been, we've all been moving along, but it's easy to look good when you're on somebody's shoulders.
How did you find the core pieces of the original team? And were there pieces that just didn't work out and you had to fire? What's your philosophy on assembling a team at the start and who you stay with?
On the firing side, by the time you get fired in our company, we've done everything. We've had a lot of long talks. We've gone to therapy together. We've tried to help you. You've tried to help us. So when the moment comes when you get fired with us, is no surprise to anyone. There haven't been a lot of big, earth-shattering firings. We had one guy who ripped his shirt off in the middle of service, flipped me off, and walked out, and I was like, all right, we got that under our belt, so we can check that one off, But otherwise, there's a lot of ex-employees. Hosea Rosenberg, who worked at Jack's, top chef guy, he just opened his place 2 weeks ago. My wife and I are in there eating dinner. There's 12 former Big Red F employees in the kitchen on the dining floor, and then there's 15 present Big Red F. I mean, it's just there's a lot of people over 20 years that are still, nobody wants to leave Boulder. So there's a lot of people that have been a part of the crew. Identifying the successful people in the early days, there wasn't a lot of finding. It was just, let's get the band together and do it.
On that point, did Hosea come to you and say, I'm thinking of starting this restaurant? If he had, would you have been supportive, or was there part of you that thought?
Oh, he did, and I helped him write his business plan, and we looked at a bunch of spaces over the 5 years it's taken him to get to this point since he won, 6 years. A lot of conversations, helped him, figure out the investor scenario and know a lot of his investors, and yeah, a lot of help. I won't take any credit for what he did, but I think I helped him.
That's great.
Tried to help him.
That's another interesting contrast with the technology startup community, where, at least as I would think about it, with technology, there's a sense that we're all in it together because at the end of the day, we're selling nationally or we're selling globally. And so we might as well make each other better. Mm-hmm. With restaurants, someone's moving across the street or down the street, there's direct competition.
Absolutely.
How does that affect willingness to collaborate in the restaurant industry, and what's been your philosophy around that?
Well, to a fault maybe, I've been very open to always helping whoever needs help, write, a business plan or talk about the scenario of investing money. And the more successful restaurants we have, I have 3 restaurants on one block, and so I want nothing but all the other restaurants across the street and down the block to be wildly successful so we can have this hub where everybody wants to come. So if there's 3 good ones and 5 bad ones, and then it's kind of an iffy area. It's a B area, and I want it to be a AAA area. So the more the merrier. There is a point where there's an oversaturation. We haven't had a lot of restaurant openings in Boulder in the last 3 or 4 years. So Oak was about 3-4 years ago now, and there's been Zeal and Life and a couple of those style of restaurants. But there's a bunch of new restaurants coming, across the street from Jack's. Joe Romano's opening an Italian place, and behind us in the dirt lot there's opening, and Bradford's opening a new place, and the Daily Camera building will be very filled with 2 or 3 restaurants. So that's another 1,000 seats possibly that'll be competing for our diners that weren't there last year. So it's an interesting. You're just always paying attention, trying to figure out where you are and all of that.
Do you invest in any of the other restaurants outside of Big Red FF?
No.
No.
I did in a pizza thing that Ramey did, Proto's Pizza. That was great. She's wildly successful. I tried to invest in my friend Drew's ice cream store, but that didn't happen. Yeah, shut me down.
So, one of the ways you've stayed so successful is by this attention to detail and having a really good experience. Do you ever come in and have employees that you either hear stories about or that you witness not living up to the brand that you've established?
Oh, sure. Every day, we have about 700 employees. I walked into Jack's Kansas City the other night, and we're only a month old, and everybody knows who I am because I was there for a long time beforehand, but I kind of snuck in and sat in the corner. And you can watch very easily, what's going on and how we're missing and the misses at the door, and you're listening to the hostess talk on the phone, and you're watching the guy behind the bar run his hand through his hair and touch his face and then not go wash his hands, and then he starts to shuck oysters, and you're like, oh my God, So always, there's too many moving parts for somebody trying to make it right all the time to not see the underbelly.
And so what's your approach? Do you yell at them? Do you yell at the manager?
No, the yelling doesn't really work. So you talk about it, and then you have to repeat yourself many times because people don't hear something you say once or twice or 5 times. And then after a while, it just becomes part of the rhythm of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get across. But you have to definitely address it.
Hands-on feedback during the heat of a night. I mean, the
Not
restaurant's
as much
kicking.
during the heat because it's not going to be taken that well, and it's embarrassing coming from me in the heat of the moment, but most definitely at the first opportune moment.
All right, so
Wait. On that thread, there's this big change, right? There's Yelp, and there's these online reviews. So it's not just you watching the guy run his fingers through his hair. What about when you read something online?
You were going to bring that up, right? So I hate Yelp. I hate Yelp. I think it's just an inappropriate medium for response. If you're going to go buy a car, you look at a consumer report, you talk to industry experts, you have a lot of professional people who are qualified to tell you what a car will and won't do, or a TV, or whatever it is. So Yelp, if you come into the restaurant, you're in a bad mood, you want to get drunk, and you're doing such a thing, and we're like, hey, you've had enough, and we don't feel responsible for you, and why don't you get you a cab, and then you get sideways with us and start to be that guy, and then we kind of get sideways back because we're tired of you being that guy, and then you go home, and 2 hours later, you've had a lot more to drink, and you just crush us on Yelp. I didn't see a rat, I saw a goat. I think I heard a horse. There was like a horse in the back alley, I'm sure of it, And so you can say whatever you want, and you can do whatever you want to us as a customer. It's your right. But I don't think it's fair because it's not always a valid assessment of a business experience. And so whenever you have a disgruntled employee possibly or anything happens, it can show up on Yelp. So it's really tough. But in every Yelp review, there's always a nugget. Like if you care enough to know that you're not perfect, then even the worst pain in the ass customer has got something, probably many things, constructive to tell you in their opinion of what you weren't doing, be it value or how the place looked or felt, or was it too cold, or they didn't like the food, they didn't, whatever. There's always something valuable in a Yelp review. Don't quote me on that.
walk us through a couple of the key elements of operations behind a restaurant. So let's start with sourcing food.
So for us, sourcing food in Colorado is great because we have this huge farm community. That term farm to table has become really hip and popular to say, but it's been going on for a very long time. People going to farms and bringing that product to their kitchen and cooking. You say farm to table to a French chef, and he's like, "What? It's like it's called going to work." So we have great farms here. We have great purveyors. We have a challenge getting seafood into because we don't have any. So we have to bring all that in. We just at Jack's got accredited by the Monterey Bay Fish Watch, Seafood Watch. So we're now green light, yellow light, red light. When it's green, obviously it's good, and it's seafood that's being harvested and taken in with a lot of care and a lot of thought. When it's in the yellow zone, you kind of want to steer away from it. When it's in the red zone, it's at a critical point of when they're harvesting incorrectly, or there's a lot of burden on a certain fishing region, and so we steer away from that. It makes it challenging because we're committed to following these rules. So, sometimes yellowfin tuna is not available, or a certain kind of crab is not available, or we have to take shrimp off the menu for a short period of time. So it makes it more challenging. We've always been very much on the sustainable wind power for all the restaurants. Before that was something that was really known, and we compost. So in all the restaurants, you don't throw something in the trash, you throw something in the recycling bin, the trash can, or the compost pile. And then all of that is more money because you have to have 3 bins in the back. And so we're trying to do the right thing. It comes at a cost, but that's what trying to do the right thing does. My friend Bruce Orrick built a house up the road here, a very environmentally perfect house for Boulder, Colorado. It cost like $3 million to build the perfect house, a house which would have probably cost $800,000 to build. But to make it right and to make it sustainable, you have to do so much more just to do the right thing. So it's challenging, and it comes at a cost, but it's the right thing to do.
So I'm a big Jack's fan.
God bless you.
We've got the fish selected. What's the prep look like for the day behind the scenes at Jack's?
Well, we get in there early. So at Jack's, we have a couple of fishermen that we buy from. We buy a lot of our product from Northeast Seafood in Denver. Paul Packer, longtime purveyor, longtime businessman in this area, lives in Boulder, has for 40 years. And then we also get a lot from Hawaii and from the coast. And so with the technology and with the connectivity, we'll get a call at 10 in the morning from a fisherman coming back at 5 in the morning in Hawaii. He'll tell us what he has. We'll say we'll take this, that, and that. And by the next morning at 8 a.m., it's sitting in our kitchen. So we come in the morning and there's product there that's been delivered and being delivered. And with restaurants, it's this crazy circus of you spend all day long building the show, and you're cleaning and you're prepping the food and you're getting everything ready and you're trying to figure out, given the weather and given the climate and given what's going on and what you have, who's going to eat what and how something is selling and how the menu mix is working, that, wow, the swordfish is really popular and this dish isn't, and I don't think I have enough swordfish for tonight, and I got way too much of the one that's not selling. So there's this constant juggle of what is and what isn't going to sell. And then you work all day to build the moment at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock when you say, good evening, it's nice to see you, welcome. And then you go hard during service for 4 or 5 hours, and then you tear it all down, and you break it all down. The place is trashed, after a 15-hour day, and a couple hundred customers who were, imagine if you had 200 people using your bathroom tonight at your house, and you're like, whoa, there's a lot going on in that bathroom. So, and there's a lot going on all over the place. So then you spend the next period of time cleaning it, and then the cleaning crew comes in and really gives it a scrub in the middle of the night, and you come back in the morning and you do it again. So it is Groundhog's Day. I mean, it is just, and it's the greatest Groundhog Day you could ever spend, but there's a lot of repetition.
One more question on operations. I spoke with an ex-Zolo employee. This is not going to be like a big reveal and gotcha. Her feedback to me was, there's no kitchen that I've worked in Boulder that just hits on all cylinders like Zolo. She just said it's rock solid, night in, night out. Why is that? I mean, first of all, I assume that, do you agree with that? Maybe not.
Oh, I think she's the smartest person.
What's the key that goes into a consistent kitchen? Where do kitchens break down?
Well, a kitchen can break down when a chef, which we have our challenges with this, is cooking for him or herself more than the customers. So there's a lot of influence that these younger chefs have, and they want to use these ingredients that are maybe a little more harder to understand for all of us. And we've all been to these restaurants where you read the menu and you need a glossary to get through the menu. And then the dish, you're reading it, and if you have an understanding of food, you're reading this dish and you're like, that just doesn't sound delicious, and then you get it, and maybe it is. Maybe the chef really put a lot of thought into that, or he or she just loved the way it sounded more than the way it tasted. More often, you'll have a chef that will never eat, a great chef will eat a dish. You make a dish, and you eat it in its entirety, because it changes over time. If you have a big brothy noodle bowl, or if you have a very refined dish with a lot of craft going into it, you pieces and parts might taste great, but all together and how it works together and how it eats together and how it looks as you're eating it halfway through. You know, nobody wants to get a dish set in front of them that you eat a couple of bites and the thing has been totally deconstructed and the egg yolk broke and it didn't really break in the way you'd hoped it to, and now it's pooling on the side of the plate, and just a lot of different things. So a great kitchen is run by somebody who's paying attention and who really is spending time thinking about all aspects, which is hard to find a chef who has that kind of wherewithal and that kind of peripheral to pay attention enough to think about all the aspects, not just cooking for themselves, and can take criticism. One of the best chefs of that is Hosea. You know, you look at this guy who you'd think would have this huge ego, and he's always been really good at taking criticism. You know, we do pre-shift every night. You taste the dish, and it didn't matter if it was a busser or a host. They'd be like, that dish is not right. And you'd be like, well, tell me, you know, what do you think? And so that's the sign of someone who isn't cooking for himself. He's cooking for his customers. That's our biggest challenge right now in a couple of our stores, is toning back the menus so that we're actually cooking for our customers. The value of what they're getting, the price they're paying, and the satisfaction of like, that was really good food. That was really good. It was just great. You know, that's hard to do. We serve 2,400 people on average a day, a meal. And so even at 1%, you still have quite a few people running around town saying that was terrible. And the haters love the haters, so they're going to tell a lot more than the lovers. And so all of a sudden 100 people, of which 84 of them or 74 of them, 76 of them were never even at the restaurant, are running around saying, oh, that meal at Zola was terrible. You know, like, really, when were you there? I haven't been there in 5 years, but my neighbor, you know, it's that. And then Yelp, and then don't, you know.
So I lied. One more question on the operations. So I'm sure that a few people out there are thinking about starting a restaurant. If we separate out sourcing the food, food prep, kitchen operations during the evening, and then front of the room, what's the differentiator for your restaurants overall? What's the most important thing in your estimation among that mix?
It's all those pieces and parts. You know, often in a restaurant, you'll have the newest employee. An entry-level position in a restaurant is a hostess. So that person is answering the phone. The very first touch a customer has is from the newest person in the business. So then in the kitchen side of things, an entry-level spot is the pantry. That's the first appetizer that you touch. That's your salad. It's your last thing in your dessert. So your two newest employees are potentially touching your customers first and last, and they're not ready for that yet. So you have to pay attention to that side, having people with real integrity and humility on the floor, handling the customers. People come out to eat to celebrate something. They're generally in a good mood. And once they walk in your door, they're not shopping. It's not like at the store where you try on a pair of jeans and you're like, that's not for me. Once we have you in our restaurant, it's kind of safe to say you're there to spend money. So it's our job to fulfill that expectation that you have. But it's every aspect of the restaurant. From the first, you know, I, as someone who's in the hospitality business and retail, giving good phone is like the greatest thing you can do. And when you have an experience like at Zappos or one of these companies that really does get it, Southwest Air, somebody tells you a joke while you're waiting for them to find you a price, you're like, did that really just happen? Like, this is crazy. When people get it, it's so obvious. And if I asked everybody in this room right now to tell me your single greatest service experience you've had in the last 24 hours, you have been out in the public, you've been to the grocery store, you've been here and you've been there. There's not, I mean, not everybody would be raising their hand to tell us, because great customer experiences are really hard to find. You could all tell me a crappy customer experience, I'm sure. But that's our challenge and that's our opportunity, is like nailing that every day. So it's every, that was a long-winded answer, but it's every point in the restaurant.
How do you keep that up after you've been doing this for so long? Do you come in, if you're having a bad day, do you just not go into the restaurant at this point?
No. That would be a lot of days I wouldn't be at work. It's not just me. I mean, I'm not controlling the pace of the restaurants. There's 10 restaurants. There's, you know, places that I don't step into for a week at a time or more. It's a lot of great people. You try to get your message across as to what you hope to be, and you convey that message a lot through talking to the senior managers, and then you repeat yourself and you repeat yourself, and then you hang out with them so that you know that they get it, and you watch them dispense the Kool-Aid, and then it's just a constant refreshing of the Kool-Aid.
And then what about, so talking about tastes and these celebrity chefs who have these amazing ingredients, we had Kim Jordan, who founded New Belgium, come, and she talked about the fact that taste for beer has changed over time.
Dramatically.
And so do you find that with food, and to what extent are you introducing new innovative dishes early in the hopes, like you have one sort of exciting thing on the menu and then some staples?
Well, we try to stay away from the new innovative things. You know, the whole molecular thing, we sat on the sideline and we loved dabbling in it, and we loved practicing it and trying it, and we had the emulsion downstairs. We were doing all the things that were going on, but that phase never worked its way into our menu mix. There's a lot of trends that over the last 20 years have come in and out of, you know, the gluten being the big thing right now that's not a trend, but there are 50% of the people in the restaurants love hearing themselves say, oh, I'm gluten intolerant. And then you see them macking a piece of bread, you know, when no one's looking. It's kind of cool to say I have a gluten thing, you know. And then there's a lot of people who have a very dramatic gluten thing going on. But you can't react too dramatically to all of that. If you just stay into what you do, maybe that's part of the reason that that woman liked Zolo so much. There's so many things on the Zolo menu that have been on the menu for 20 years that are just, we keep trying to make them better than they were yesterday, but they're really good. You know, they're just solid. So I worked at Zuni Cafe in San Francisco in 1985 and 86. Great restaurant. This was 29 years ago. In its 31st year of business last year, it was voted the best restaurant in San Francisco. They have like 5 things on their menu, you know. It's a tiny little menu. It's the greatest roasted chicken you'll ever put in your mouth. It's fantastic Caesar salad. They'll make risotto for you to order every time you order it. They could care less what the guys down the street are doing, and there's a lot of guys down the street in San Francisco doing crazy stuff, but they just do what they do, and they don't pay attention. Sam Calagione, who owns Dogfish Head, I watched a bunch of his stuff last night, and that has been his thing. He's like, there's so much going on in the beer industry, and I know Kim, and we've had this conversation. There's no way I could pay attention to everything that's happening in the brewing industry. I'm just doing what I know I can do, and I'm just paying attention to this, and everybody else do their thing, and I'll just do mine, and hopefully I'll stay on game, and I'll keep going. But you can't pay attention to all these different trends, because now then there's 10 different chefs who all want to go in that different direction, and then you have a great experience at a Jack's or a Zolo or a Frasca or an Oak, and then you come back a year later and they're doing this food that's just off the wall, and it's totally different, and your expectations are dashed, and it's not where you want to be.
As you look back over the arc of building Big Red F, what's been the hardest problem for you to untangle, either an individual episode or in general?
I would have liked to have had more financial wherewithal when I first started out. So I had a dear friend who was our bookkeeper for 17 years, and she just was fantastic, but was never going to bring us up to a different level. She was just going to count those beans, and there was never going to be a mistake, and there was never going to be a tax deposit missed, and there was always going to be complete transparency and authentic handling of the books. No drama. But I didn't have someone who was going to really take us to the next spot and be a little more forward thinking and question my decisions, you know. I like having people in the room that can tell me I'm full of shit, you know, and we get a lot more done that way. And then there's a lot more honest communication that way. And so 3 years ago, I hired a fantastic CFO, and it has been just a totally different experience running the businesses as having someone who's has that wherewithal.
Can you give us an example of something that your CFO encouraged you to do?
Well, in planning restaurants. So when we build a restaurant, I'll go in and I'll look at a space and I'll be like, oh, this is going to cost $500,000. You know, let's do this thing. And then before, it wouldn't cost $500,000, it would cost $750,000. But I've only raised $500,000. So then I'm like, you know, and then you're hustling. And the beauty of a restaurant business is you're busy day one. You know, there's cash flow and you can solve a lot of problems with that. The downside is you're busy on day one, and there's a lot of problems that come with being busy on day one. So having someone who has a little more financial wherewithal to question, is it really 500 or is it 750? Let's raise 850 so that we're not hustling for cash, and let's not do this thing that we keep doing. So we are getting better at figuring out how much it's going to cost to do something.
One more topic before we open it up for questions is, and it goes back to team. I've heard you talk a little bit about millennials, and I'm interested in how that generation's approach to work juxtaposes against the tradition of the restaurant, which is you earn your stripes, you work your way up, and that's not necessarily the mentality of a lot of millennials, at least in broad stereotypical terms. How do you size that up, and how have you approached it?
I think millennials many of them are getting a bad rap because they're all considered millennials. I think that in business, the very nature of good manners has gone to the wayside. So I would never consider getting a phone call at work. When I was young and working hard in the restaurants and hustling, earning my way and trying to build a reputation, when the manager came back and said, "Hey, Query, somebody's on the phone for you," you were like, "Oh my God," you know, you were crushed. And then you worked extra hard for the next 10 hours to make sure that you overcame the phone call. Now you got people answering the phone during service on their cell phone or texting or Facebooking. And so that whole social connectivity that this age group has is so much different, and it's very interfering to retail business and to hospitality business. But manners, not just in that millennial thing, but I think there's going to be a lot more conversation moving forward in business just about good, solid manners, about treating people with a lot of respect, treating your fellow coworkers with a lot of respect. And when you have people in a room that have great manners, great things happen. There's just a different sort of business that's happening with somebody who you employ who gets it, who knows how to speak to you in a way that you didn't even realize you wanted to be spoken to. I'm 51 years old. I still say yes, sir, and no, sir to people, younger or older. I'm in that servitude mode when I'm on the floor, and it's all about, I'm going to crush you with my ability of hospitality. You know, I'm going to like blow you away. It's my goal for the evening. And if I can't, then I'll come back tomorrow and try it again. But there's a lot of that we're talking about just really just killing people. And the harder you are to get to, I dare you to try and be that customer that I'm not going to win over. I'm going to get you, you know. And you see it in great restaurants. Bobby Stuckey at Frasca is a great practitioner of there's no way you're going to get to that guy. You know, he's going to make it work. And I think in a lot of our stores, we have spoken about it so much that there is a lot of that's going on. And so the millennial side of life, it's challenging.
On the manners front, and as well as work ethic, I mean, one dimension is hire for it, but once someone's in the door, how do you train on it?
So we're hiring for this personality these days. The first interview is everything. You know, I don't care as much how you're dressed because I buy my clothes at McGuckin's, but you coming to an interview and talking to me in a way you're coming in to work in a hospitality business, that first 3 minutes is just everything. You know, how comfortable you are, how well you speak. We have people do a writing assignment. We ask them to write 2 or 3 pages for us, and you can read something that someone has written and be like, that's just not going to work, you know. Or you're like, you're hired. I don't care where you worked. You know, we've got people coming in and out of the restaurants. When we open the Post, we have this woman named Nancy in Kansas City. Never worked in a restaurant in her life. She'll own this company in like 3 years. I mean, she just gets it. You know, people get it, and either you do or you don't. Same with the kitchen. When you see a young cook walk in, we have what's called a stage. You come in and you sort of do a working interview. You can tell in 2 minutes how this person walks through the kitchen, the awareness they have of how they're handling their knives and where they ask to put their knife bag and just their general sense of where they are in the world while they're in a kitchen. It's pretty evident of how quickly you can see in a person when they come in for an interview. So we're hiring so much for personality and training for skill. You know, I can teach somebody how to answer a phone, but I can't teach somebody to know to say yes ma'am and to grab the door when an old lady walks in the door, or to help somebody that needs help, man or woman. Just like, these are just common sense things. But common sense is actually kind of rare. That word common sense is kind of backwards. But common sense, it's actually uncommon sense to know how to do something like that.
So before we open it up, it sounds kind of exhausting. You've got multiple time zones, you've got fish and different ingredients coming in the morning and then going into long hours. What's your approach to balance, and what do you do to sort of unplug?
Just had that conversation this morning. So me personally, I like to fish. I like to ride my bike. And I think that the more the bigger you get, the more talent you have to help you. So I don't feel overworked or overburdened, or, you know, the new time zone thing just happened last month, so that's all new. But I don't get done with a day and be like, oh my God, I have so much going on. I mean, I do have a lot going on, but I don't think I have any more going on than anybody in this room, and I'm not saving lives, and nothing really that critical is in balance. Somebody might have had a bad meal tonight, so we'll figure that out. You know, we'll solve that problem. But it all feels pretty balanced. I mean, it could definitely get a lot better. My wife's in the back of the room, so I'm supposed to say that.
And in terms of you know, key things that drive you, goals that you have that are out there, or what is fulfilling, what's at the top of the list?
Well, making the older restaurants continue to be successful from a business standpoint, helping a lot of these 20-year employees have something at the end for their 20 years, which will probably be 30 or 35 years of employment at that time, and just running great businesses. We have a great situation with Big Red F and the community, and some really great nonprofit partners that we do, I think, some good work for and have for a really long time, and they can count on us. And just being a really solid place to work. You know, there's no bullshit when you come to work with us. You know, it might not work out for you, but it won't be because we didn't try to make you successful in that role. And it's a safe place. You know, it's nothing's going to beat you up. But those are important, to really treat people and the community, and you know, it's all the customers in this town that are responsible for our success, not us. It's everybody that decided to go to one of our joints because they like us or they've had a good experience, and so there's this definite two-way street to running businesses that are going to be around for. I mean, I can't imagine Jack's really not being there in 50 years, you know, or the West End, where you're just going to go into that place and those businesses will be there. I might not be there, but they will be there. I don't doubt that.
So I think we have a microphone, and where's Seth? So Seth, I promised you first question. You want to take it, or you want to pass it on to one of your students?
I can pass it on.
All right. So we have a student from Professor Murray's class that wants to take the first question, or that he'll assign the first question to.
Okay, yeah, it's working. So I've worked in food companies, nothing anywhere close to nice as Jack's. I've been there, I've loved it. And one of the things I noticed with when working with food and service is speed seems to be everything. And I, as a person, was unable to handle speed, and it frustrated managers, and it frustrated everyone that I worked with. So how do you deal with employees out of state that can't necessarily deal with speed?
Kind of the same way it sounds like it ended up for you. You gotta hustle, man. It's restaurants, it's all about hustle. You know, there is only one speed, and it is full throttle. So it's a very taxing business. When you work in the kitchen, you're spending 14, 15 hours in the kitchen. The first 8, you're getting ready, your first 6, and you're just moving at lightning speed, and then you open, and then it's all about lightning speed. And then you got to clean up and get your stuff together. And then, like most people in the kitchen, you go out and blow off steam and have a couple beers with the buddies, and then you get up and do it again. But you got to, it's all about the hustle.
Do one more student question, and we'll open up to general audience. Any students on the campus?
Sorry that didn't work out for you, man.
All right, let's open it up.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So there's 72 of us engineering entrepreneurship students here, and thanks a lot for coming in.
Oh,
it's been
thank
great.
you.
But we did an assignment to kind of look at businesses on Pearl Street and estimate finances. And is the main reason restaurants struggle is because they can't pay off the loans after a few years, and then they just get tired of it, or you can't pay yourself as the owner where everyone else is getting paid first?
It could be the loan, depending on the size, but more often than not, it's that the operation itself doesn't work. Because if things are working from a business standpoint, you're going to pay off that loan. So it's more about the function of the business. And there's so many, the average, profit percentage in the restaurant business is around 4%. So it's tight. That's everything from quick service to mom and pops to the Flagstaff house. So when you only have 4%, that's like grocery store numbers. That's better than grocery store numbers, but it's tight. So if you're doing really well, then let's say you're at 10%. So you can solve problems with 10% profit when you're doing $2 or $3 million a year in business. Might take a little longer, but it's all about having that thing really work. And really, that's a problem with a lot of chefs. They don't have the financial skills to run a business. I've had incredible luck. I've been fantastic at managing my incredible luck and finding people that can come in and be a part of that. But it's all about making sure that the numbers work, And if they don't, then making changes. We've changed concepts, and we've, sold things that weren't working. You got to know when to draw the line in the sand and stop, or retool, or do whatever you need to do. Work harder, work smarter, close earlier, close for lunch. Our restaurants, only Zolo and the West End Tavern serve lunch of the 10 stores that we have. Lunch is a hard segment for a restaurant to make money on. You have to be really busy. None of the staff wants to work it because you don't make the tips you make at dinner. Nobody's drinking. Nobody's, anybody roll in and buy 2 dozen oysters and drink a good bottle of wine for lunch lately? Not much, not often. So lunch is very hard, and so you do a little less revenue by closing for lunch, but you become more profitable by closing for lunch.
Just one other part of the question was, how do you decide, as the owner, how much to pay yourself versus like paying off a loan or something like that?
So my deal in the early days is that the owners are usually the last one to get paid. So I had a guaranteed payment to partner, which was part of the conversation of having a little more control in the early days, that I put right into the operating agreement. I paid myself a certain amount of money, which wasn't an enormous amount of money, and it's never changed in 20 years. But I made sure that I wasn't the last person to get paid. If the business was going to go out of business, I was going to be one of the people that was, was going to be paid on a pro rata basis right down to the very end. So it's important that people take care of themselves when you're writing a business plan and not do some number in there. Let's just get it going and we'll make so much money, because you might not. And then you're not making it. So the business might be making it and you personally aren't. That's a whole nother scenario of a tough road to haul. So, yeah.
Other questions? We'll start over here. Yeah.
Hey, Dave.
Hi.
I actually have a couple of questions, so maybe I can creatively put two together and get both answers. But my first question is, I'm in the tech space, the startup space, probably not a huge shocker in Boulder, but we always say that, just because you have a great idea or you're a founder doesn't mean you can run the company well, right? The engineer may not also be the best person to run a successful company. But it sounds like, from hearing you talk and all of that you were a great chef, are a great chef, and also a really smart businessman, and that's why you've been successful. So what do you attribute, to that brain power and all of the success you've had just from figuring out operationally, financially, legal agreements, all that stuff?
It's kind of like my parents are just like, I don't even understand how he figured this shit out. But I was very interested all along, and I wrote the first business plan, learned how to use Excel, and just had a lot of confidence, maybe through sort of naivete of didn't really know what I was doing and what I was getting myself into. I'm not a very risk-adverse person, so when I look at my siblings, who none of them are entrepreneurs, and there's 7 kids, and I'm the only one who's out doing that kind of thing, I think I took a lot of risk because I wasn't afraid of doing it, not because I had so much confidence. I just was, maybe it was just that kind of thick in the head, like, let's do this. Well, it'll work out. It'll all work out. So, and I've also invested in a lot of companies that are not in the restaurant sector. And when I'm looking at those investments, it always comes down to who's running this company and what do they know, about what they're doing. And unfortunately, many of the cases of my investments, it's been that case where they didn't know what they were doing. So it is important that somebody at the helm has a full grasp of what's going on, and it's really critically important, if it's possible, that that person has the greatest ego and the most sense of themselves and their humility as possible. Because when things do go south, you can solve problems with people who are listening. But when you get somebody who just thinks they have all the answers and we're going to do this and I know the way, then you've got a lot of problems. I was asking Frank Day and Joe Romano and Scott Beck and all these people in my industry, just bugging them to death with questions and asking them, a lot of advice along the way and picking their brains and trying to figure it out.
Who among that group was the most generous or gave you
They
advice
all
that
were.
stuck?
All of those guys, and many, many more. Bill Roberts is in the back of the room. He was my lawyer in the early days and helped steer me out of a lot of gutters. And yeah, there was a lot of people who really helped me along the way, without a doubt.
Let's keep going. Right there. In the middle? Well, we go to the back and then we'll come up here next. We'll go to the back first.
Hi, I have 2 questions. First question, you got financing, but you started 20 years ago. Do you think if someone wanted to go into the restaurant business, they'd have as much ease in getting venture capitalists or angel investors?
Angel, yes. I don't know that any intelligent venture capitalist would put any money to a restaurant unless they wanted so much of it that it wouldn't be a good deal for the operator. But yeah, when I look at my kids are in their early 20s, and I'm trying to think about them doing what I did when I was their age, because I was their age when I was doing this, when I was starting. And so I think it's very possible. You have to have a great idea. You have to have an incredibly well thought out business plan. And then you have to have some luck. There's always, for a long time, we only did restaurants in existing restaurant spaces because we didn't want to spend any money on anything that was going to cost us more than what we had to spend. So there was a hood, there was bathrooms, there was walk-ins in place, all these things. And we're looking at 3 places right now that are those deals. 2 of them, the operators are just ready to walk away. So all hundreds of thousands of dollars of infrastructure and equipment and everything, they got so sideways with the landlord that the landlord's basically asking them to leave. And so there's still great deals to be had, without a doubt.
Okay.
But it's certainly 20 years later more expensive to hire people and buy product and all of that stuff. So, but I think it's very doable.
Where did you get the name Big Red F?
I got asked that today. We were sitting at Jack's. So there is a Big Red F, a physical Big Red F in Jack's Fish House, which 20 years ago last week, I was running around trying to find things to put on the wall, and Ben Franklin had just gone out of business. So there was a thrift store down on Pearl that had the F, and I grabbed it and I stuck it on the wall. And then 10 years later, we were trying to figure out what to name the restaurant company, and there was 2 finalists. One was a pair of pants with one of those New Year's Eve things coming out of the zipper, and we were going to call it Party Pants, or it was Big Red F. And so we kind of said, all right, I liked Party Pants, but I got outvoted. So it was Big Red F. Yeah, it means absolutely nothing. Yeah.
Come up here. Ballpark, so one of those places that has the equipment in it, what kind of capital would it take to get that off the ground? ballpark?
You could do one of those. I mean, depending, like, so we did Zolo, and it was 125. It was used to be Swenson's ice cream store. So there was like camping equipment. Literally, it was like all this tabletop stuff that you could pick up and walk away with. And the hood was like right here, so I had this big dent in my head for a long time. And we just made it work until we could afford to buy a real hood and buy real equipment. But, you know, somebody could do a restaurant for $100,000. No doubt.
Hi, Dave.
Hi.
I was just wondering kind of what the first hour of your day tends to look like and how you decide which of your restaurants or which project you jump
Sometimes
into.
so we have this thing called shift notes, and it's a diary that all the general managers put out and fill out every night. So it's like my morning papers, and I read it religiously in the morning, first thing, and that will kind of dictate who needs some help, or there's a leak right now at Jack's that we're trying to fix, and maybe there was a slip and fall, maybe there was an incident with an employee. It talks about who was in the restaurant and their experience, so that if I run into you at the grocery store, I can be like, hey, I was Zolo yesterday. And they're like, whoa, dude's connected. And I'm like, yeah, I got that. So just trying to keep in touch with, it's a great tool, and I can't be in every restaurant every single night. So it's a fantastic way to have a real sense of what's going on in every store. So that kind of dictates what's going on.
How do you end up networking or finding people that can help mentor you or just help you out in general when you start a business?
Just call them. Just straight up, be quick, be real concise with what you want. If you can get their email address, it's better than putting them on the spot on the phone, because you catch them in a bad moment or they're in a hurry and they're going to want to say no because somebody told them that no is better than yes these days because there's so many people asking for things. So write them an email and tell them exactly what you want, and tell them, I don't want to waste your time, and I want to make it, I have some questions for you. And then before you go to that meeting, make sure you make an impression on that person that they valued the time they spent with you, that you made them a little smarter from the experience. You know, I love talking to people. I've met 3 people today in this conversation that I had earlier for this NUCO thing that was going on. And I was like, I ended up talking to them. They were like, okay, I got to go, man. I'm like, oh, just one more minute. You know, like, there's really great people doing smart things, and you might be one of those. And so you probably have something to offer whoever it is you're trying to get that advice from. And so go prepared. You know, really make an impression. My son is living in LA and having some success writing right now. And so he's meeting with some of these people, and he ended up meeting with some really well-known people, and he was terrified. I'm like, Harrison, you got this. Just be yourself and challenge them. And now he's made these friendships with these really well-known people because he's gone in and kind of been a little world famous for a quick moment, and they're enjoying the conversations. So then you call them back, and they're like, yeah, absolutely, I can do that again. I can make time for coffee. But starting off with email, you know, just like, would you mind if I fired 10 questions at you on email? It's a great starter way to get somebody's attention, and it's showing them that you understand that they're super busy.
Thank you.
Rich?
Dave, thanks for coming tonight. Can you offer just 1 or 2 marketing tips for, say, a new restaurant that's about to open and they've got limited budget? You know, what can they do to try to attract customers, get the awareness out, try to get some people to come in and try them out because there's so much competition and nobody knows about them?
Right. In town, out of town?
It's just a theoretical. So let's say.
So social media is a great tool for all of us to use. You've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, you've got a lot of different things that are at your disposal to use, and then you should try and get some intelligent marketing lists from some competitors if they can give those to you, or they'll be generous enough to lend you some names. And then you need to say something that's going to get people's attention, because there's a lot of chatter coming at all of us every day on Facebook and on Twitter. So you have to be very specific about what you're doing and how you think you can help these people. If I was going to, when we were opening a Jack's in Kansas City, it was all about oysters, because there weren't oysters in Kansas City. So 85% of everything we talked about was like, you're going to be able to come and get these oysters, oyster stuffing, oyster stew, oyster shooters, raw oysters, this way, that way. Come get your oysters, and just repeating and repeating and repeating So that by the time we opened, there's all these oyster heads who were just like, finally, you know, we got a place we can go and get oysters. So I think knowing and really pounding in on what you're going to offer, and then just really putting that out there. Not sure that was a great help, but it's tough. It's tough when you're just starting out and you don't have a big budget.
So you mentioned how you can't be in all the restaurants at one time. And when you first started out, you were just at one restaurant and you were able to oversee everything and be a part of everything. And as the business grows, can you talk a little bit about that transition, moving from being able to be on top of everything to having to let go a little bit and yet still staying in touch and being informed? And what advice would you have for others who go through that transition?
You have to be willing to acknowledge that your business might be 5% less great than it might be if you were in the store all the time. So when I feel like when I'm in one of the restaurants, it's going to be better than it would be if I weren't in there. And the relationships with the employees are going to be better, and I'm going to have conversations with people and connect, and hopefully the employees are going to walk out and think, that's kind of the reason I work here, because that was great conversation, and he remembered this, and he's genuine, and we talked, and then I'm just displaying to them what it's like to work the room and talk to customers and be in the kitchen, and then I'm down there cleaning the toilets and hustling dishes, whatever it takes. So I'm only going to be in there for 20 minutes or an hour or 5 hours. Come in there with a reason to be there. Often I would go in, and I still do, and I don't have a plan, and I'm just in the way. You know, you're either in the band or you're behind the curtain, but you can't be both, because if you're on stage and you're not ripping it with everybody else, you're just in the way, and it's so obvious that you're in the way, and you're just kind of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm very specific about what I hope to get done when I walk into one of the restaurants, and jump in, even if it's only for an hour. An hour as a participant in what's going on is way better than 10 emails or 3 meetings before service starts. So you have to just show your face, or if you're not going to be there for a long time, you got to apologize for not being there for a long time, and have a real conversation of like, I'm not going to be in Fort Collins for 2.5 weeks. I'm not going to see you guys. So I'm sorry that I'm not going to be there. Hit me with any questions you got. Here's some things that I've heard and talked and we're thinking about, and you just kind of get that dialogue. You just always be connected at some level. You hope to be. You can't be everywhere at all times, but you can. Conversations are easy. Quick phone call. How's it going? What's going on? What are your challenges? What can I help with you with right this week, last week, next week? Just staying in touch is important.
Let's take 2 more questions. We'll go here and then up. Let's go here first, and then we'll go up.
Can you talk a little bit about how you select a location for a new restaurant? Can you operate under the philosophy that if you're doing it right and you're making great food, that people will come find you? Or is it really important to have a location where you kind of in the mix of things and you may have that foot traffic or that visual kind of marketing appeal?
Harder, and a big thing of what we just went through with Kansas City, making sure we were in the right location. Growing up in Boulder, I kind of had a sense of what was good and bad. When we first opened Zolo, people were like, you're crazy, man. That's so far away from the mall, and, you know, it's a B location. And I was like, I don't know, man. There's great parking and right next to McGuckin's, and, you know, it feels kind of good, you know. And so you kind of got to go with your gut. But there's also, like, the Happy Noodle and the Bitter Bar. We're like a block off Main and Main, you know. So you are around the corner and down the street. You don't get that walk-by tourist traffic. People have to know what's going on and where you are for them to find you. So it's important. In Texas, I was talking to this guy in Kansas City the other night. In Texas, they have all the revenues from all the restaurants. It's public information. So then you're just like, all right, boom, there's where everybody's jamming. Let's go there. So that was kind of an interesting thought. But I think you're talking to a lot of people and you're hanging out. You know, I've spent a lot of time. It took me about a year to find the Jack's Lodo location, and it was a lot of nights just sitting down in lower downtown Denver, watching people walk and where they were walking and how they were getting into their cars and what corners were dark, and kind of just never felt like they were on point of what we wanted to do. I bought that building that the Post Brewing Company is in, and then I sat out in Lafayette. I love Lafayette, but I sat out in Lafayette for the next 3 months and thought, I've made the worst decision in the world, because you're out there on a Tuesday night and it's like one drunk dude walking down the road and an older couple who's, walking to their friend's house, and there was nobody on the street. And it was just like, man, this is going to be really tough. And it's been the greatest thing we've ever done. Lafayette is like on fire. So it's kind of hard to tell sometimes, but if there isn't something there presently, one of our biggest challenges and road or potholes has been, we'll go there and we'll give them what they don't have. Well, maybe they don't have it for a reason, because like Des Moines. Anybody here from Des Moines? Perfect. So Des Moines is a cool town. I drive through there every summer on the way to Michigan, and I've always been like, Jackson, Des Moines, man. Des Moines would be a great town for a Jack's. Maybe not. Maybe they don't want a Jack's, and Omaha's kind of in that same zone. And maybe there's a reason that there's not a certain style of restaurant in an area, because that customer base isn't ready for it, or doesn't want it, or it's not something that they're dying for. So location is tough, and location is truly everything. It really is.
Last question.
Awesome. I know you're busy. Thanks for your time. So I want to ask you about growth, and 2 questions about that. How do you fund restaurants? Is it internal revenue, or do you get investors? And then I guess the biggest question is, what's your goal? Where does it end? Is it 20 restaurants? Is it where you are now? How do you think about this, of adding each new restaurant, and how much time that takes you?
So the funding part, it's all investor-based. So I have a group of the original 5 couples that I got involved with, and they're all still involved. And then we knew we were going to take Jack's on the road, so we invited some more people to participate, and some people that had maybe a little more wherewithal to do something a little bigger and repetitively on the capital raise. So, but that only works if the restaurants are producing profits and doing well. So it's a house of cards as to how you're rolling along doing it. You have a great idea, and you've got all the growth plans in the world, and everything seems great, but unless you're doing what you say you're going to do, it's going to kind of grind to a halt, because they're not going to be, buying your shtick anymore. What was the second question? Where does it end? Oh my God. So I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. I'm not that guy that wrote this great exit strategy, and I have an idea. It involves a lot of the people that I'm working with having a share in the booty when the booty finally comes, whatever that looks like. But I don't really have this grand exit plan. It's really fun right now what we're doing, and the restaurants are all doing well, and the part of opening a restaurant, if anybody's ever been involved with that, it's the greatest, most fun thing you can do in business is opening a restaurant. It's really fantastic energy, and you're in this new space, and you're bringing a bunch of people together who've never met, and you get them all training in the same mentality, and you're kind of dispensing the Kool-Aid, and they're all like really getting into it, and then the customers show up, and then they are having the same experience, and that's a high of like years that you can roll on, and then then the challenge comes of how do you keep that mentality, that energy level going. But I don't really have at this moment, it was another conversation this morning, but we're working on that exit.
It sounds like you've had several conversations today. This was a special one for us to be included in.
Oh, yeah.
A reminder, we'll have a reception next door. Please help me give a warm thank you to Dave.